Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments. So in case you're not aware, there's a company called Tuned In Grading that just started out, and it looks like they are starting to encapsulate and grade vinyl records, both new and sealed vinyl records, and also, of course, the vintage, more expensive, more collectible stuff. This is going to be very interesting to see how this pans out, because I've said this before on this channel. Almost all forms of physical media are pretty much going to be encapsulated and graded at some point in time. We've already seen it with, of course, video games. Now we're seeing it with VHS movies. Now we're seeing it spread to cassettes, 8-tracks I'm even hearing, laser discs, CDs, and of course, vinyl records. Now, in my opinion, vinyl records is the most fascinating because that particular market always had organic collectability. Let's be realistic. People have been collecting vinyl records for decades now. I'm not going to say that it's a full established market, but it's more established than that of cassette collecting, CD collecting, or even any of this more obscure VHS Betamax movie collecting, Laserdisc collecting, whatever it is. Just keep in mind that vinyl records, in my opinion, are the one market to watch. Now, I want to be very clear in my assessment here. This doesn't mean that you should start collecting vintage vinyl in hopes that this catches on, because vinyl records still have a long way to go, especially with third-party grading and encapsulation. One of the draws, one of the things that a lot of collectors like to do with their vintage vinyl, or even new vinyl for that matter, is listen to it. So third-party grading at present time is still going to be a very niche market that this particular service is going to appeal to. That said, I can also assure you that a lot of auction companies are clamoring at the bit to make this a thing. I mean, let's be realistic. If we look at some of the most iconic vinyl releases over the years, over the last few decades, even in the vintage era, like the Beatles' Yesterday and Today album that had the controversial butcher meat cover album that was pulled from shelves, if you have a copy of that and you want to send it in for grading, that would be potentially something that could sell at a premium at auction if this particular service takes off. Now, I do think this is going to be a thing. I do think that eventually, most record collectors are going to have to come 360 and understand that a lot of people that are collecting this stuff are doing so to preserve the particular item in question and also for investment potential. I'm just going to be 100% honest. So, in my opinion, when we look at all these markets that have physical media that are being graded and encapsulated at present time, I honestly think record collectors, that market is going to be huge at some point. It may still take another 10, 20 years for that to get going. But I do think in the future, people that collect this stuff are going to gravitate towards grading it. Now, do I think it's going to be on par with video games? That's tough to say. Because right now, after what happened with Wada Games, what happened with the alleged market manipulation in that particular collecting category, there's a lot of people that are kind of turning away or taking a wait-and-see attitude towards graded video games. So it's very hard right now to compare these two markets, especially given the fact that even before Wada Games came on the scene, video game grading was a thing with VGA. VGA were the ones that kind of pioneered video game grading. They just didn't get involved wisely in the secondary market until Wada Games came along and pretty much blew the barn doors wide open. And pretty much every Timmy, Kimmy, and Poindexter out there wanted to get a graded video game for the Nintendo Entertainment System, for the Super Nintendo, for the whatever it was. They wanted to attempt to quote-unquote invest in graded video games. With vinyl records, the demand and the approach of this just seems more organic at present time. That could change. It really depends on how this particular grading company is going to operate. Remember, guys, I have no assessment as to how this grading company is. I just pretty much heard of them through pretty much collectors talking, investors telling me, hey, there's this company called Tuned In Grading. You might want to check them out. They're starting to grade vinyl records. They're going to be expanding into cassette CDs. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. So at present time, I don't know that much about them. I do know how they were founded. I do know about their history and origins. They're out of Texas, ironically, which is also where Heritage Auctions is located. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I do see a lot of auction houses clamoring at the bit to make this a thing. And really, it's going to depend on how collectors, how investors, how speculators view this particular market going in. If they can really ignite fire as this being the next big thing, this is going to potentially take off. It's very interesting, guys. One market that I am really looking at from a really observing eye is that of graded VHS movies. And it's interesting how that came out of the gate and there was a lot of push behind it. But now it seems to have pulled back a little bit. So I'm just seeing what's going to happen in that market as well. Because again, in my opinion, record collecting is much more organic than VHS movie collecting. And if that offends you, I apologize. Please don't come after me with pitchforks and torches. I understand that VHS movie collecting is a thing. I'm not attacking any collector of that category. But let's be honest, if we look at market caps, it's not on par with vinyl record collecting that has been a thing now since literally 1960s and 70s. If you go back to the 1960s and 70s, people were collecting avidly vinyl records. That's why there's a lot of those vintage releases still in existence today for that particular reason. So it's going to be very interesting where this one goes. I was going to give more of an in-depth analysis on this, but in all honesty, I just want to take a wait-and-see attitude. So this is just pretty much an introductory video to tell you that vinyl record grading is here, and it's going to be very interesting to see what this market does, and more importantly, how collectors, speculators, and investors react to it. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.